The dress was the color of dark red wine. Penny had spent 3 weeks sewing every stitch by hand, by candlelight, after the work in the stables was done for the night. It was not a noblewoman's dress. It had no gold embroidery, no imported lace from the southern territories, but it had something no purchased dress could ever have. Every stitch was an intention. Every seam was a promise she made to herself that this night would be different. She stopped in front of the polished metal mirror in the room she shared with 3 other women of Ashvale clan, and breathed slowly. Her dark brown eyes looked back at her with a mixture of fear and hope she could no longer tell apart. Her hair was pulled into side braids, with a few loose strands framing her face. Simple, but careful. "You look beautiful," said Bryn, her friend since childhood, sitting on the edge of the bed with her knees pulled to her chest. "He's going to see you, Penny. He has to." "He promised," Penny answered quietly, as if saying it too loud might break the spell. And it was true. Corvin Ashvale, son of the clan elder, had promised. Not with formal words, not before witnesses, but the way men like him promised. With whispers close to her ear, with long glances in the corridor, with a hand resting on her waist during the last full moon gathering. "You're different from the others, Penny. You'll see." She believed him. Perhaps because she needed to believe. Perhaps because being the blacksmith's daughter with no mother, no dowry, and no standing in the clan hierarchy made every gesture of attention feel like a promise of something more. Or perhaps because Corvin knew exactly what to say to make her believe it. The great hall of Castle Veth was the place where the wolf world showed its true face. Beauty and cruelty in equal measure. The dark stone walls rose to a vaulted ceiling where resin torches burned in iron brackets, casting a trembling orange light over everything below. Banners of the 6-packs of the territory hung from the beams. Red and gray of the Ashvale, black and silver of the Veth, deep green of the Cauldron, and 3 others in colors Penny barely recognized because she had never attended an event of this kind before. The gathering of clans happened once a year. It was the moment when alliances were sealed, agreements were made, and young wolves were presented as candidates for formal bonds. For many women in that hall, this night meant the future. For Penny, it meant a promise kept or broken. She entered through the side corridor. Women of her standing did not use the main entrance. The scent of the hall wrapped around her immediately. Wine spilled across oak tables, candle wax, the leather of armor worn by guards posted along the walls, roasted meat seasoned with herbs she could not name, and the unmistakable scent of wolves in positions of power. A combination of earth, amber, and something that bit at the air like electricity before a storm. Bryn appeared at her side within moments, emerging from the crowd with 2 cups of wine. "He's over there," she murmured, tilting her head discreetly toward the left side of the hall. Penny did not need to search. Her eyes found Corvin with the ease of someone who had spent months watching that man's every movement. He stood among a group of young Ashvale men, well-dressed, dark hair swept back, smiling at someone Penny could not quite see through the distance. She took a step toward him. And then she saw. Corvin's hand was resting on another woman's waist. Penny stopped. The woman was Serena Coldmere, daughter of the chief counselor of Veth clan. Tall, blonde, wearing a blue silk dress that cost more than Penny would earn in an entire year. The kind of woman born to occupy spaces like this one, while women like Penny were born to sew wine-colored dresses by candlelight and dream of hands that would never belong to them. Maybe it is just courtesy, Penny thought. Maybe he is simply being polite. She kept walking. That was when Corvin saw her. For 1 second, only one, there was something in his expression she could not interpret. Then he turned completely toward Serena, said something in a low voice that drew a laugh from the blonde woman, and when he looked back at Penny, there was only distance in his eyes. "Penny," he said, as if she were a casual acquaintance. "I did not know you would be here." The wine cup grew heavy in her hand. "You invited me," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "Last week you said you wanted me to be present when..." Circumstances have changed, he interrupted, and there was a coldness in his tone that cut deeper than any chosen word. My father reached an agreement with Elder Coldmere. Serena and I will be announcing our formal bond tonight. The hall did not stop. Conversations continued. The torches kept burning. The wine kept flowing. But for Penny, everything became very quiet. I understand, she said. And that was the worst possible answer, because it was true. She understood perfectly. She understood that she had been a distraction, a pastime, a disposable promise made to a disposable woman. She understood that wine-colored dresses sewn by candlelight could not compete with blue silk gowns and counselor surnames. Serena looked at her with the kind of polite pity that hurts more than contempt. You are the blacksmith's daughter, aren't you? The blonde woman said, with a thin smile. How lovely the dress. Did you make it yourself? Penny did not answer. She turned and began walking toward the exit, measured steps, not running, not letting her chin fall. The 3 weeks of sewing, the burned candles, the fingers pricked by needles, all of it fell away behind her like dust raised by a closing door. Do not cry here. Not here. Not in front of them. She was nearly at the corridor when she walked into something solid. Not a wall. A man. Penny stepped back and looked up, and the first thought that crossed her mind, completely involuntary and completely inappropriate for the moment, was, he is absurdly good-looking, not in the smooth, calculated way Corvin was. This was a different kind of beauty, built in hard angles, in the strong line of his jaw, in the dark amber eyes that watched her with an attention that seemed to have weight. Nearly black hair, slightly disheveled, as though the man did not care, or did not need to care about appearances. A thin scar crossed his left eyebrow, shoulders that made the black cloak look like a second skin. 2 other men stood slightly behind him. One was smiling, the kind of smile that knew it was being watched. The other had his arms crossed and wore an expression suggesting he was cataloging everyone present for later judgment. Sorry, Penny said, stepping to the side. The amber-eyed man did not move immediately. He simply continued looking at her with that strange attention, as though reading something written in a language he knew, but rarely encountered. You are leaving, he said. It was not a question. Yes, she answered. From your own formal bond ceremony? Penny blinked. It was not my bond. Ah, said the smiling one, the brown-haired man beside him. So it was something else, something that looked like a promise but was not. Quiet, Rael, the amber-eyed man said, without taking his eyes off Penny. The third one, arms still crossed, simply watched. Penny looked at all 3 and felt something she had not expected to feel in that moment. Curiosity. She did not know who they were. Their cloaks bore no visible crests, but there was something in the way the space around them functioned. How people drifted aside without seeming to notice. How the guards along the walls had grown slightly straighter since these men arrived. Good night, she said, attempting to move past them. The man who just dismissed you, said the amber-eyed one, his voice low, almost casual, but carrying a weight that made the surrounding air feel denser, did not deserve the dress. Penny stopped. She turned slowly. You know nothing about the dress, she said. The amber eyes met hers, and for the first time that entire evening, Penny felt as though she was being truly seen. No, he agreed. But I intend to find out. The amber-eyed man did not introduce himself. That was the first thing Penny noticed. Every wolf of standing she had ever encountered led with their name, their clan, their rank, as though the words themselves were armor they needed to wear before speaking to anyone. This man simply looked at her as if the conversation had already been decided, and he was merely waiting for her to catch up. I do not know you, Penny said, because it felt important to establish that. You will, he replied. Rael, the smiling one, let out a low sound that was almost a laugh. The third man, tall, dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair, and the stillness of someone who had learned long ago that silence was its own kind of power, said nothing at all, but the corner of his mouth moved slightly, which Penny suspected was the equivalent of a full laugh for someone like him. "That is not an introduction," she pointed out. "No," the amber-eyed man agreed. "It is not." He still did not offer one. Penny looked at him for a moment longer, then made a decision. She was humiliated, her chest felt hollow, and she was wearing a dress she had sewn herself to impress a man who had just announced his bond with someone else in front of half the territory. She did not have the patience for games, regardless of how broad this particular man's shoulders were. "Enjoy the gathering," she said, and walked past him into the corridor. The cool air of the stone hallway was immediate relief. The sounds of the hall dulled behind her, the music and voices becoming a low murmur, and Penny pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. Then she heard footsteps. She opened her eyes. Rael was leaning against the opposite wall, arms folded, still wearing that smile that seemed permanently attached to his face. He was handsome in an uncomplicated way, the kind of man who knew it and had long since made peace with the advantages it provided. "He does not usually follow people," Rael said conversationally. "He did not follow me," Penny replied. "You did." "Fair point." He tilted his head. "You are not afraid of him." "I do not know who he is." "That is usually what makes people more afraid, not less." Penny studied the man in front of her. "Who are you?" "Rael Voss." He gave a small, theatrical bow. "Beta of the Northern Pack at your service. The quiet one is Caden. He does not talk much, but do not let that fool you. He has opinions about everything, and will share exactly none of them." "And the other one?" Rael's smile did not change, but something behind it did. "You really do not know." "I just said I did not." He looked at her with what seemed like genuine interest. "Darius. His name is Darius." The name landed with no particular ceremony, but something in the way Rael said it, the slight shift in his posture, the almost imperceptible care in his tone, told Penny that the name was supposed to mean something. She sorted through everything she knew about the Northern Territories, the packs beyond the Ashvale borders, the names that appeared in the Elders' Council reports that she sometimes overheard while working near the main hall. Then it connected. Darius Veth. Not just any wolf, not just a pack alpha. The Alpha King. The one who held dominion over all 6 clans in the territory. The one whose word could dissolve alliances or build them. The one whose name the Ashvale elders spoke with a particular careful weight, the way you speak about weather that could turn. Penny looked back toward the hall entrance where the man was now standing in the threshold, watching her with those amber eyes, completely unbothered by the fact that she had walked away from him in the middle of a sentence. "Oh," she said. "Yes," Rael confirmed pleasantly. "Oh," she straightened. "That changes nothing about what I said." Rael blinked. Then he laughed, a real one this time, surprised out of him. "I am going to enjoy this gathering considerably more than I expected." Penny was still looking at Darius. He had not moved from the threshold. The torchlight from the hall behind him outlined his frame in amber and shadow, and she was struck again by that involuntary thought she'd had before. The one about how unreasonably good-looking he was. And she was annoyed at herself for thinking it, because it was entirely unhelpful given the circumstances. Then Corvin appeared. He came through the hall entrance with Serena at his side and several Ashvale men behind him, the way young wolves of middling status traveled in groups to inflate their sense of importance. He was laughing at something, relaxed, already moving on from the conversation that had hollowed Penny out 20 minutes ago. He saw her in the corridor and his expression flickered. Then he saw who was standing near her, and the flicker became something harder to read. Darius had turned slightly toward the corridor when Corvin emerged. It was not a dramatic movement. He did not reach for a weapon or raise his voice. He simply turned, and the quality of his stillness changed, the way a predator's stillness changes when something enters its peripheral vision. Corvin stopped walking. Serena, to her credit, noticed immediately that something had shifted and placed a hand on Corvin's arm. He did not seem to feel it. "Alpha King," Corvin said, with a bow that was slightly too deep to be natural. Darius looked at him with the same attention he had given Penny, but with a different quality to it. Where his gaze on her had been curious, on Corvin it was simply measuring. "Ashvale," Darius said. One word. The surname, not the given name. The distinction was not subtle. Corvin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I was not aware you had arrived. We would have prepared a proper welcome if—" "The gathering prepared itself adequately," Darius said. His eyes moved briefly to Penny, then back. "I understand congratulations are in order. A formal bond announcement." "Yes." Corvin straightened slightly, something between pride and relief crossing his face. "Serena and I—" "The blacksmith's daughter," Darius said quietly. Everyone went still. Corvin blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "She was promised something tonight," Darius said, and his voice had not risen at all, had not sharpened with anger, was simply the same low, even tone he had used since the beginning, which somehow made it worse. Was she not? It was not a question. Penny recognized that by now. When Darius spoke in that particular way, he already knew the answer. Corvin looked at Penny with an expression that moved quickly through several emotions before landing on something defensive. That was a private matter. There was no formal— "No," Darius agreed. "There was not. Which tells me everything I need to know about how it was intended." The corridor was very quiet. Serena was looking at Darius with the wide, careful eyes of someone recalculating multiple things simultaneously. Rail had straightened from the wall and was now standing in a way that was casual but positioned. Caden had appeared at some point without Penny noticing, and she had the distinct impression he had been there the whole time. Penny looked at Darius. He was not performing this for her benefit. That was what struck her most. He was not making a scene to impress her or to make Corvin feel small as a favor. He said what he said because it was accurate, and because men like Darius Veth did not adjust the truth for the comfort of rooms. She felt something shift in her chest. Not hope, not yet. Something quieter. The recognition that she was standing in a corridor with the most powerful wolf in the territory, and he had just said the word promised in a way that treated her promise as something worth naming. Corvin said nothing more. He guided Serena past them with a stiff nod, and disappeared back into the hall, the group of Ashvale men trailing after him with the energy of people who had witnessed something they would be discussing for weeks. Penny exhaled slowly. "You did not have to do that," she said. Darius looked at her. "I know. It does not change anything." "I know that too." She studied him for a moment. The scar above his eyebrow. The amber eyes that gave nothing away except attention. The complete absence of the need to explain himself. "Why did you then?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because the dress deserved better than what happened to it tonight." Penny felt something in her throat tighten unexpectedly. She looked away before it became visible. "Come back inside," he said. Not a command, not quite an invitation either. Something in between that left the choice entirely with her. She looked at the hall entrance. The music had resumed. The banners of 6 clans hung in the firelight. Somewhere inside, Corvin was standing with Serena and beginning the rest of his life. A life that had never actually had a place for Penny in it, no matter what he had whispered near her ear on moonlit nights. She looked at Darius. "If I go back in there," she said slowly, "I go back as myself. Not as anyone's convenient option for an evening." "I would expect nothing else," he said. She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she walked back through the entrance into the light, The hall looked different the second time. Penny could not explain it precisely. The torches burned the same. The wine still moved from table to table in the hands of servers who kept their eyes down. The banners still hung from the beams in their careful order of precedence. But something had shifted in the quality of the air, or perhaps in the quality of how she moved through it, because people were looking at her now in a way they had not been before. Not at her, exactly. At who was walking slightly behind her. She became aware of it gradually, the way you become aware of a sound that has been present for some time before you consciously register it. A conversation that stopped as she passed. A woman who leaned toward her companion with something whispered behind a raised cup. Two elder wolves near the far table, who tracked the movement across the room with the careful attention of men whose entire occupation was reading the significance of small things. Darius walked behind her and slightly to the left, not beside her, not claiming anything publicly, but close enough that the association was visible to anyone paying attention. And everyone in that hall was paying attention, because the Alpha King had arrived, and the Alpha King did not typically trail anyone through rooms. Rael appeared at her right, with the easy comfort of someone who treated social navigation as a form of entertainment. "You are aware," he murmured, low enough for only her, "that half this room is currently restructuring everything they thought they knew about tonight." "I am aware," Penny said. "And you are not going to stumble or look at the floor, or do anything that gives them the satisfaction of seeing you uncertain." "Absolutely not." "Good." He sounded genuinely pleased. "I like you considerably." They settled near one of the stone columns that divided the hall, far enough from the main tables to have a clear view of the room, but not so far as to suggest retreat. Caden materialized beside Darius, with the silent reliability of a shadow that had learned to anticipate direction, and for a moment, the four of them simply stood, and Penny held her wine cup and looked at the room that had been trying to make her invisible an hour ago. Bryn found her within minutes. She came through the crowd with the focused energy of someone who had been searching, and when she saw Penny, her expression moved through relief, confusion, and something approaching alarm in rapid succession. Her eyes went to Darius, then to Rael, then back to Penny, with a look that very clearly communicated a significant quantity of unasked questions. "I will explain later," Penny told her quietly. "You will explain now," Bryn whispered back, in abbreviated form, "because I have been looking for you for 20 minutes, and the last I saw you, you were leaving. I came back. With..." Bryn's eyes moved again, and she lowered her voice to something barely above breath. "With them." "Yes. Penny." "Bryn." Her friend pressed her lips together in the expression she made when she was deciding whether to push further or trust that information would eventually arrive. She chose trust, as she always did, but not without one last significant look that promised the conversation was only postponed. It was approximately half an hour later that it happened. The hall had settled into its middle rhythm, the formal presentations completed, the elders deep in their corner negotiations, the younger wolves moving between tables with the social energy of people who understood that alliances were built in informal moments as much as official ones. A group of cauldron warriors had gathered near the eastern wall, broad-shouldered men with the particular confidence of wolves who trained seriously and knew it. One of them had been looking at Penny on and off for several minutes. She had noticed without making it obvious that she noticed, which was a skill she had developed over years of existing in rooms where drawing attention to yourself was rarely to your benefit. He was tall, with copper-red hair pulled back, and a jaw that suggested his ancestors had been designed specifically to make sculptors feel inadequate. His armor bore the cauldron wolf crest. He caught her eye once, raised his cup slightly, and smiled with the relaxed confidence of someone who had done that before, and watched it work. Bryn leaned close. "The cauldron one has been looking at you. I noticed." "He is..." Bryn paused, searching for the word. "Exceptionally well constructed." Penny looked at him again with the objective assessment of someone who had moved past the wreckage of one evening's humiliation and was not entirely unwilling to acknowledge that the world still contained attractive things. "He is very hot," she said simply. The temperature beside her changed. It was not a sound. It was not a movement. It was a quality of stillness that became suddenly different in the way that a room becomes different when something large and quiet stops pretending not to be paying attention. Penny turned her head. Darius was looking at the Cauldron Warrior with an expression that was, technically, completely neutral. His face had not changed. His posture had not changed. He was still holding his cup with the same unhurried ease he had maintained all evening, but his jaw had tightened by approximately 2 degrees, and the amber of his eyes had darkened in a way that Penny suspected had very little to do with the torchlight. Rael had gone very still beside him with the concentrated energy of someone exercising extraordinary self-control. Caden had developed a sudden, intense interest in the architecture of the ceiling. "Did I say something?" Penny asked. "No," Rael said, with a careful precision that suggested the opposite. She looked back at Darius. He had returned to his default expression of composed authority, but there was something around the edges of it that had not been there before. Something that was working to be invisible and was not entirely succeeding. "Are you familiar with the Cauldron Warrior?" she asked him. "I know every wolf in this territory," he said. "Is he someone I should avoid?" A pause that lasted exactly 1 beat longer than necessary. "He is someone of no particular significance." Rael made a sound that he immediately converted into a cough. Penny studied Darius's profile for a moment. The strong line of his jaw. The slight tension in the muscle below his ear that came and went as he appeared to be making a decision about something internal. She had grown up in a clan household. She had watched alphas her entire life. The way they moved, the way they staked territory through posture rather than words, the way dominance expressed itself in small, precise contractions of the body before it ever reached the voice. She knew what she was looking at. The most powerful wolf in the territory was bothered by her comment about another man. The realization moved through her slowly, and with it came something she had not expected to feel that evening. A quiet, tentative sense of her own leverage. Not cruelty, not a desire to wound, but the particular awareness that she had said one ordinary sentence, and it had cracked something open in a man who gave every impression of being made entirely of controlled surfaces. The Cauldron Warrior began moving in their direction. He had the easy, unhurried walk of someone who had assessed the situation and liked his odds. When he reached them, he was looking primarily at Penny, with the polite acknowledgement of the others that protocol required. "I do not believe we have been introduced," he said, his voice carrying the slight lyrical accent of the northern Cauldron Highlands. "I am Oren, second commander of the Cauldron Eastern Garrison." "Penny," she said. "A beautiful name." His eyes moved briefly, unavoidably, to the men beside her, and something in his expression recalibrated without quite retreating. "I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all," Rael said, with the tone of someone who found this particular moment genuinely delightful. Oren extended his hand toward Penny in the old formal gesture, palm up, the invitation to be led to the floor where several pairs were moving in the slow, deliberate dance that the gathering traditionally opened with. She looked at the offered hand. Then, because she was not cruel, but she was also not unaware, she glanced at Darius. He was watching the extended hand with an expression that was doing significant work to remain exactly where it was. "I would be glad to," Penny said to Oren, and placed her hand in his. The muscle beneath Darius's ear contracted once, sharply, and then his face settled back into composed authority with the finality of a door being closed from the inside. But his eyes followed her to the floor. And they did not leave. Oren was a good dancer. Penny noticed this with the detached appreciation of someone whose mind was partially elsewhere. He moved with the measured confidence of a soldier who had learned formal dance the same way he had learned combat. As a discipline, something to be mastered rather than felt. His hand at her waist was respectful. His steps were precise. He smiled at her with the uncomplicated interest of a man who saw something he wanted and had not yet encountered a reason to doubt his chances. "You are not from the noble houses," he said, not unkindly. "No," Penny confirmed. "Ashvale clan?" "By residence, not by blood." He nodded slowly, processing this with the careful attention of someone recalibrating social coordinates. "And the men you were standing with?" "Acquaintances," she said. Oren's expression suggested he found that particular word choice interesting. "The Alpha King does not typically make acquaintances at gatherings. He receives delegations. He hears petitions. He does not," he paused, "stand beside women near columns and watch the room." Perhaps he was simply standing near the column. "He has not looked away from you since you stepped onto the floor." Penny kept her expression neutral. "You are very observant for someone who was supposedly focused on asking me to dance." Oren smiled, and it was a genuine smile this time, less performed than the earlier one. "I am a second commander. Observation is not optional." They completed the turn, and Penny caught a glimpse of where she had been standing. Rael was saying something to Caden with animated gestures that Caden was ignoring with practiced expertise. Darius stood exactly where she had left him, cup in hand, amber eyes tracking her movement across the floor, with an attention he was no longer making significant effort to conceal. When her eyes met his, he did not look away. She did, eventually, because she was the one who looked away first, and she was not entirely sure what that meant, but she suspected it meant something. "He is going to be a problem for me, isn't he?" Oren said. "I genuinely do not know," Penny answered, which was honest. The Cauldron Warrior looked at her with something that had moved past flirtation into something more like respect. "You are unusual. I have been told. I mean it as high praise." "I know," she said. "Thank you for the dance." When the music settled into its pause and the pairs on the floor separated, Penny walked back to the column. Not because she had been directed to, not because she felt she owed anyone her proximity, but because the evening was not finished, and she had made a choice when she walked back through the hall entrance, and she intended to understand what that choice meant before the night ended. Rael greeted her return with an expression of elaborate innocence. "Good dance?" he asked. "Fine, thank you." Oren is a skilled dancer. Very, he searched for the word, well constructed, as I believe someone near me recently observed. "Rael," Darius said. "I am simply making conversation. Find another subject." The silence that followed was comfortable for everyone except the part of it that sat between Penny and Darius, which was a different kind of silence entirely. She looked at him. He was looking at the middle distance with the focused expression of a man thinking about something he had decided not to say. She decided to say it for him. "It bothered you," she said quietly, pitched for him alone. A long pause. What I said. About the Cauldron Warrior." He turned to look at her then, and the amber eyes were very direct. Darius, she had learned in the space of one evening, did not deflect. He simply chose what to confirm and what to leave in silence. "Yes," he said. One word. Unelaborated. Offered without apparent embarrassment or the need to qualify it. Penny looked at him carefully. "We met 2 hours ago. I am aware. You do not know me." "I know," he said, "that you spent 3 weeks on that dress. I know that you came to this hall carrying a promise someone else made carelessly. I know that when it was broken in front of witnesses, you did not make a scene. You did not plead. And you did not let them see you break." He paused. "I know that when I told you the dress deserved better, you looked away so I would not see that it affected you." Another pause. "I notice things, Penny." Her name in his mouth was the first time he had used it. It landed differently than she expected. "That is still not knowing me," she said, but her voice was quieter than she intended. "No," he agreed. "It is the beginning of it." Before she could answer, the hall shifted. It was a subtle change at first. the kind of atmospheric adjustment that wolves felt before they consciously identified it. Conversations lowering in volume, bodies orienting toward the center of the room, the elders at the far table straightening with the alert attention of men who recognized ceremony when it began to assemble itself. Elder Ashvale had moved to the center of the hall. Corvin stood beside him, Serena at his other side, her blue silk dress catching the torchlight. The formal bond announcement was beginning. Penny went still. She had known it was coming. She had been told. And yet the knowing did not entirely prepare the body for the moment of witnessing. There was something in watching it happen. The elder's voice rising over the hall, the formal words that sealed two wolves together before their clans, that made abstract knowledge into something with weight and shape. Bryn found her hand in the dark beside the column and held it. Penny held back. She watched Corvin take Serena's hand in the old formal gesture, and she waited for the feeling she expected. Grief, perhaps, or humiliation revisited, or the particular hollow ache of a door closing on a room you had imagined living in. What she felt instead was stranger. She felt the distance. The specific, measurable distance between the woman who had walked into this hall 2 hours ago, carrying hope sewn into wine-colored fabric, and the woman standing here now. The distance was not large in terms of time, but it was absolute in terms of everything else. Something warm and solid settled beside her. Not touching, not claiming, simply present in the way that certain things are present. A fire in a cold room, a wall at your back in uncertain terrain. Darius had moved to stand beside her while she was watching the announcement. He said nothing. He simply stood there, looking at the ceremony with the neutral authority he brought to all things, and made it possible for her to stand there too, without the moment crushing her. When it was over, and the hall broke into the sounds of acknowledgement and celebration, Penny exhaled slowly. "Thank you," she said, very quietly. "You do not need to thank me for standing," he replied. "I am not thanking you for standing. I am thanking you for not saying anything while you did it." He was quiet for a moment. Then something shifted in his expression, barely perceptible, the closest thing to softness she had seen on a face built primarily of hard edges. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "Outside. The eastern terrace. The hall is going to get considerably louder in the next half hour, and I find," he paused, "that I would rather continue this conversation somewhere that does not require competing with celebration." Penny looked at Bryn, who released her hand with a small nod that communicated both "go" and "you will tell me everything" simultaneously. She looked at Darius. "All right," she said. The eastern terrace was a wide shelf of stone that jutted from the castle wall above the tree line, open to the night sky with a low parapet of old carved rock along its edge. The air outside was cold and clean after the heat of the hall, carrying pine and the distant mineral scent of rain somewhere to the north, and Penny breathed it in with the relief of someone who had been holding themselves carefully together for hours and could finally, incrementally, let some of that go. Darius stood at the parapet and looked out at the dark tree line below, and she stood beside him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Why me?" she said finally, not as a romantic question, as a real one. He considered it with the seriousness it deserved. "There is a scent," he said slowly, "that certain wolves carry. Rare. It is not something taught or performed. It is lineage. Old blood." He paused. "Yours is one I have encountered only twice before in my life, and both times it belonged to wolves who shaped the history of this territory." Penny turned to look at him. "I am the blacksmith's daughter." "You are," he said. "And you are also something else. Something that whoever raised you either did not know or did not tell you." His eyes met hers. "I intend to find out which." The forest below them moved in the cold wind. Somewhere in the hall behind them, the celebration of Corvin's bond was reaching its height. Out here, there was only the wind and the stone, and the amber-eyed king standing beside her like something that had been waiting in the edges of the evening for exactly this moment. Penny looked at him and felt the ground shift slightly beneath the life she thought she had. "You should know," she said carefully, "that I do not trust easily." "I know," Darius said. "I am not asking for trust tonight." "What are you asking for?" He looked at her with those dark amber eyes, and for the first time all evening, she saw something in them that was not authority, not composure, not the careful armor of a man accustomed to being the most powerful presence in any room. She saw something that looked unmistakably like wanting. "Tomorrow," he said. "I am asking for tomorrow." Tomorrow came with gray light and frost on the stone windowsills. Penny was already awake when it arrived. She had not slept much, which she expected. But the sleeplessness had not been the hollow, aching kind she had anticipated when she first walked into the gathering. It had been the restless kind, the kind that comes from a mind working through something it has not yet fully categorized. Bryn was asleep across the room, her breathing slow and even. Penny dressed quietly in her ordinary clothes, the wine-colored dress folded with careful hands and placed at the bottom of her traveling bundle, and went to find out what tomorrow actually meant. He was already on the eastern terrace. She had half expected this, and half not. He stood at the same parapet where they had spoken the night before, a cup of something hot steaming in his hand, looking at the forest below, with the expression of a man who had also been awake for most of the night, and was considerably more composed about it than the situation perhaps warranted. The dawn light was doing something unreasonable to the angles of his face, and Penny noted this with the private resignation of someone who had accepted that this particular problem was not going away. "You are punctual," he said without turning. "You knew I was here before I reached the terrace," she replied. "Your scent precedes you by approximately 40 feet. A pause. "I have been aware of it since yesterday evening. It is," he chose the word carefully, "distinctive. You mentioned something about lineage last night." "I did." She came to stand beside him at the parapet. The forest below was still dark in the low places, mist sitting in the hollows between the trees. "Tell me what you know." Darius turned to look at her then, and the amber eyes were very clear in the morning light. "What I know with certainty, and what I suspect, are two different things. I will not give you suspicion as though it were fact." "Then tell me what you know with certainty." He was quiet for a moment, the way he was quiet when he was choosing precision over speed. "The scent you carry belongs to a bloodline that predates the 6 clans. Before the territory was divided, before the gathering existed, before the current hierarchy was established, there were founding wolves. 7 lines. Most dissolved over generations, absorbed into the clans. The blood thinned until the markers disappeared entirely." He looked at her steadily. 2 of those lines did not dissolve. They went quiet, which is different. Penny looked at him. "You think I am from one of those lines. I do not think it. I recognized it." The mist moved below them in the slow, unhurried way of things that have no reason to rush. "My father was a blacksmith," she said. "His father was a blacksmith. My mother left when I was 3 years old and no one spoke about her after that." Something shifted in Darius's expression. Not surprise, exactly. The settling of a piece into a shape he had already partially constructed. "Your mother," he said carefully. "I do not know who she was. I do not know where she went. My father would not discuss it, and I learned young that asking cost more than it returned." "Her name," Darius said. "Do you know her name?" "Senna," Penny said. "That is all I have." The word landed and Darius went very still, in the particular way he went still when something significant had occurred, and he was deciding how to handle it. Penny watched the stillness and waited. "Senna Arvith," he said finally. Not a question. The name meant nothing to her, and everything about the way he said it suggested it should. "You knew her," Penny said. "I knew of her." He set down the cup on the parapet stone. She was the last confirmed carrier of the Arveth line, one of the two founding bloodlines that went quiet rather than dissolving. She disappeared from the Northern Territories approximately 24 years ago. There were searches. They found nothing. The general conclusion was that she had died. His eyes met hers. She had not died. She had built a life somewhere quiet, with a blacksmith, and she had a daughter. The frost on the stone windowsills behind her caught the early light. Penny thought about her father's silence on the subject of her mother, the way certain questions had closed his face like shutters drawn against weather, the way he had loved her with a fierce, uncomplicated devotion that never quite erased the sense that he was also, always, protecting her from something he could not name to her without naming other things. "What does it mean?" she asked. "The bloodline. What does it actually mean for me?" "It means," Darius said steadily, "that you have a claim to a seat on the founding council that has been empty for 24 years. It means that every alpha in this territory who understands the old laws will recognize your standing the moment it is confirmed. It means that Corvin Ashvale did not dismiss a blacksmith's daughter last night. He dismissed someone whose lineage predates his entire clan by 4 generations." A pause. "And it means that what I noticed when you walked into the hall was not incidental. It was recognition." Penny was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I need to sit down." "There is a bench," he said, and gestured to the stone seat along the inner wall of the terrace, which she had not noticed before, and she went to it and sat, and he came and sat beside her, not at a formal distance, and they were quiet together while the morning continued arriving. After a while she said, "Last night, when I said that about Oren." "Yes. You were bothered. We have established this. I want to understand why. Honestly, not the political answer." She looked at him. The real one. Darius looked at the forest for a moment. Then he turned to face her, and the careful composure was present, but the thing behind it was also present, that wanting she had seen the night before, clearer now in the honesty of morning light. "Because," he said, "from the moment you walked into that hall I could not look at anything else. And I have been in this position for 11 years, and I have attended every gathering in that time, and I have never once had a problem looking at other things." He held her gaze. "So when you looked at another man and said what you said, I discovered that I had apparently developed an investment I had not yet formally acknowledged, even to myself." A pause. It was an informative moment. Penny looked at him. The Alpha King, sitting on a stone bench at dawn, telling her the truth about something that made him look like a person rather than a sovereign, and doing it without flinching. She thought about the dress. The 3 weeks of sewing. The hope carried into a hall that had not deserved it. She thought about a mother named Senna, who had gone quiet rather than disappearing, who had chosen a blacksmith and a small life, and who had perhaps been protecting something she knew her daughter would eventually need to find for herself. She thought about tomorrow, and what it was allowed to mean. "I am not easy," she told him. "I do not trust in a straight line. I will question things and push back on things, and I will not be managed." "I am not interested in managing you," Darius said. "I am interested in you. The distinction matters." "It does," she agreed. She looked at him for a long moment, at the scar above his eyebrow, and the amber eyes and the jaw that held tension it had been holding all night, and she made a decision that felt less like a leap and more like the last step of a walk she had already been taking. "Then here is what happens," she said. "You help me understand what my mother's bloodline actually means and what it requires of me. I will not be handed a destiny. I will understand it and choose it. And whatever this is," she gestured briefly between them, "it moves at a pace I am comfortable with." "Agreed," he said, without hesitation. "And you do not do that thing again where you speak about other men as though they are of no particular significance, simply because you do not want me to find them interesting." The corner of his mouth moved. It was the first time she had seen anything on his face that approached a smile, and it was a small thing, barely there, but it reached his eyes. "I will endeavor," he said, "to manage my reactions with more dignity. That is all I ask." Bryn found them on the terrace an hour later, arriving with 2 cups of morning tea, and the expression of someone who had woken up, processed the events of the previous evening, and arrived at a significant number of conclusions that she was visibly restraining herself from delivering all at once. She stopped when she saw Darius, looked at Penny, looked back at Darius, and then sat down on the other end of the bench with the composure of a woman deciding to simply accept the shape of the world as she found it. "Tea," she said, handing 1 cup to Penny. "Thank you," Penny said. Bryn looked at Darius. "I have known her since we were children. She is the most stubborn person in any room she occupies." "I have gathered this," Darius said. "Good." Bryn wrapped both hands around her cup. "Then you know what you are working with." Rael and Caden emerged onto the terrace shortly after, Rael with the bright energy of someone who had slept well and found the morning full of promise, Caden with the steady quiet of someone who had also slept well, but felt no need to advertise it. They took in the scene with the efficiency of men accustomed to reading situations quickly. Rael looked at Penny, looked at Darius, looked at the small distance between them on the bench that was smaller than it had been at any point the previous evening. "Good morning," he said, with a warmth that meant several things at once. In the days that followed, the gathering wound through its final ceremonies with Penny present in a way she had not been present the night she arrived. The confirmation of her lineage required the testimony of 2 elder wolves who had known the Arveth name, the formal acknowledgement of the founding council seat, and a gathering of the 6 clan elders before whom Darius stood and named what he had recognized, clearly and without qualification, before witnesses who would carry the record. Corvin Ashvale was among those witnesses. She watched him understand what he had dismissed, watched the specific quality of that understanding cross his face and settle into something he would carry with him. She did not feel satisfaction exactly. She felt the clean, quiet finality of a door closing properly, latched from the inside, nothing left ajar. The wine-colored dress was worn one more time, on the final night of the gathering, when the founding council seat was formally recognized, and Penny stood in the great hall of Castle Veth, not as a blacksmith's daughter who had entered through the side corridor, but as herself, fully, for the first time. Bryn was in the front of the gathered crowd. Her eyes were bright. Darius stood where he was supposed to stand, at the head of the hall, in his capacity as Alpha King, but his eyes found hers across the room, with the same attention they had held since the beginning, steady and unhurried and entirely certain. She thought about what he had said on the terrace that first morning. "I am not asking for trust tonight. I am asking for tomorrow." He had asked for tomorrow, and tomorrow had come, and then the day after that, and each one had proven itself worth the asking. The council seat was old, and it was hers, and she would learn what it meant, and choose how to carry it, on her own terms, at her own pace. The founding bloodline that her mother had carried quietly into a small life had not been lost. It had been waiting, in the hands of a woman who sewed wine-colored dresses by candlelight and walked into difficult rooms without letting her chin fall. Some things go quiet, Penny understood now. Not because they are finished, but because they are waiting for the right moment to be recognized. And hers had come.